Make a Minky ruffled blanket with me. Hi, my name is Fallon and I love to quilt, but today we're not actually quilting. Today we're going to be making a blanket for my daughter. She is a teenager and sent me some photos of a blanket she really wanted, and I told her I could make it for her. So let's get started. All right, so to bring this blanket together for my daughter, the first thing that I'm going to do is make sure the two pieces of fabric I have match in size. So I have this beautiful animal print Minky. It's a little thinner, has a beautiful feel to it. And then for the back, she wanted this Minky that is very fluffy, is honestly making a big mess in my quilt space, but she really loved it. So this is going to be the back, and the two fabrics go really nice together. They're almost very close in size, but I do need to do a little bit of trimming. Then I also grabbed this satin fabric here. This is what I'm going to use for the ruffle around this blanket. So I'm going to cut this into strips, fold it in half, and I'm going to pin it to the blankets and pleat them a little to make a nice fun ruffle for her. And that is the look she's looking for. Now, since she wants this ruffle to go around the edge of the blanket, I am going to curve the edges so that I don't have to come to perfect binded points with the ruffle. I think that would be a real struggle. So I'm just going to use, I think just this candle here that is sitting next to me to line up some curves on the corners, and I think that'll make this a lot less stressful to bring together. All right, so I have both of my fabrics trimmed to size. They're both the same size, and I got my satin cut to 4-inch wide strips, and that's 4 inches by width of fabric. I sewed them together end to end and pressed the seams open and pressed the fabric in half. So here is all of that fabric, and you can see it's 4 inches wide, so I could get a nice ruffle on here. So now I'm just putting the satin with the raw edges faced together. So the raw edge, the open fold area, right up against the edge of my fabric. And so the ribbon's facing into the center of the fabric. And every 2 inches or so, I'm putting a little pleat in it. I'm just using the stiletto, putting it down and just folding it over just a little bit. And I'm putting a clip in to hold it. Once I finish going all the way around this, doing that, and not even, you don't have to get it completely even. You can have it be at different lengths apart. You could have it closer, just the type of, you just want to get the type of ruffle that you want for your blanket. So if you don't have clips, you could also use some straight pins if you have those, whatever you have to keep the ribbon in place. After you go all the way around, you're going to put your backing fabric on top of this right sides together, and then we'll sew all the way around it, leaving an opening to turn. So I'll show you that once I get the ribbon on. Okay, so sometimes you have to shift your plan a little bit. This is going to add some more work for me, but after I got all of the ruffle in place to go around the outside, I realized when I put the backing fabric on here, it was going to be pretty hard to remove the clips, keep the pleat in place, and adjust the backing fabric on here. So I decided I'm just going to go ahead and baste the ruffle in place. I'm sewing using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I increased my stitch length just a little bit. But once I sew this ruffle in place, I can put the backing fabric on, and I think it'll be a little less stress for me to do it that way. I think this is turning out really nice. This sewing is going to be pretty easy. I'm just going around the edge and I don't have to leave an opening to turn this. And I do think in the long run, since I am leaving the opening to turn this, if I hadn't basted this ruffle in place, turning it would be a lot more difficult having the clips there holding the pleats for the ribbon in place. So I think this was a good adjustment for me. Now when I sew the backing on, I'm going to sew it using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then when I turn this and do a top stitch around the edge, I think this will be really, really secured because there's going to be a lot of stitches here at this point. I put a lot of clips here at the corner to hold it nice and even in place. I'm just going to go around really slow, pivoting with the needle down as I go around the curve. There we go. This fabric is really shredding. So far, I think the hardest part about this whole process is the Minky fabric, how much it shreds. It just made a mess everywhere in my sewing room. All right, so I'm going to sew around here and then we'll add the backing on. All right, so I have the whole blanket pinned and I put 2 pins where I'm going to start sewing around, and I put 2 pins where I end, and they're facing in a different direction than my other pins so that I remember not to sew over where I'm going to flip this blanket later. So I went ahead. From sewing that ribbon on, I noticed that this can be a little difficult to sew with the Minky. So I put my walking foot on. I think that will make it easier to sew along here. So I'm going to line up and start sewing around here. I'm going to back stitch at the beginning, just so when I turn this, none of my stitches come undone, and I'm going to remove pins as I go and just carefully sew around this whole blanket. The walking foot will help feed this fabric through much more evenly. This is a lot of thick fabric through here, so this will make sure I don't get any bunching or anything like that. This fabric is really slick. I'm having trouble holding it in place and helping feed it through even, so I'm going to get one of my grip gloves and that'll help me. So this is the same type of glove that I use when I'm quilting my quilts together, and I think this will help feed through. This feels much more stable feeding this through now. I think that'll work a lot better. It doesn't feel like my hand's just sliding across now. Make sure I'm getting all layers of fabric. It looks good. So I pinned this well. Getting up to my first corner, so I'm just gonna, just like before, go slow around If I need to pivot a little, leave my needle down and turn. Just slowly work around. All right, so this part is just some really easy sewing. There's a lot of weight to this blanket, so anytime I feel it dragging, I'm just going to adjust it and then start sewing some more. But when I get around to the end where those two pins are sticking out, I'm going to backstitch really well there again, and then I will show you flipping the blanket right side out and how I'm going to pin it together and top stitch it to finish off that opening I left. All right, so I have sewn all the way around the blanket, and now I have this opening to turn it so we can take a look and see how it's turning out. So here's the opening. Just gonna go all the way to the other side and pull it through. And just a note, I did go all the way around the seams to visually make sure that I closed everything up. Here's how it's looking. So cute. She is going to love this. All right, let me show you how I'm going to finish this off. Oh, this blanket is so heavy. All right, so here is the open area. And the nice part is it's just gonna kind of, if you get it straightened out, this up here, if you get it nice and straight, the fabric will just kind of want to lay where your natural seam allowance is. So once I get it nice and even, I'm just going to put some pins across here to hold it in place. So I'm just going to put some pins in. See, that's just holding it in place there. Just making sure I'm catching all of it. And I want to make sure it's turned in enough that when I top stitch this down, none of this is going to come apart. All right, so now I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew right along the edge here. So I'm going to sew right along the edge here. That should catch the fabric on the back too. Sew all the way around the whole blanket right along the edge of the animal print, and that will give this a nice, beautiful finished look. All right, so the blanket is completely finished. You can see the ruffle all the way around. Both sides look really good. The top stitching just kind of hides in the fabric, but it does hold the edges down to give a nice finished look to this. So here is the blanket. I mean, it really looks the same all the way around, but the ruffle really gives it a fun little feminine touch. I think my daughter is really gonna like how the blanket turned out, and let me know in the comments if you plan to make a blanket like this for the child in your life. It's always fun when you can find a DIY project that your teenager is actually going to love. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.